Good evening. I am the narrator, and welcome to my parlor. Tonight's story is Mementos in the Sand. There's not much in my small town. There never has been. We have a bowling alley, a roller rink, and a laundromat with a video arcade. A malt shop, and of course the landfill. Growing up, I bowled at the alley, skated at the rink, and wasted quarter after quarter at the arcade. Its screens and sounds seemed a wise investment at the time. When the time came to earn a living, I studied my options. I dreaded the facts about my diet, so malts were out of the question, as was most everything else. The landfill it was. The application asked only my name, address, and phone number. The receptionist handed me a pencil, and I was hired on the spot. Then there was a brief orientation session. My boss specified the bins and the materials they held. My schedule was 9 to 5 on weekdays, off on weekends. At first, my wage was just $10, enough for a one-bedroom apartment and necessities. At the time, I aspired to nothing more. On my first day, I met my coworker, Collins. Work was simple, unloading and sorting through trucks. Time passed quickly, as it would the following days. By the weekend, my routine was well established. I didn't enjoy my work, only my paychecks. Mostly, I liked returning each evening to my apartment, which, though humble, was mine. It housed my belongings, my couch, my TV, and microwave, all of whom I'd moved from home. On Sunday evenings, I returned there for dinners. I should mention now that the landfill and the impound lot were consolidated into one. Far as I know, this is unique to my town. This was the mayor's idea, meant to reduce taxes. Its only achievement that I can see has been destroying working vehicles. My coworkers and I routinely pilfered them for whatever we fancied. Normally mundane items, sporting equipment and household gadgets. One morning, however, one appeared that was anything but. This is its story. It was an RV, Winnebago Voyager, as used by families, friends, and aspiring rock bands. It was well kept, both inside and out, with brown decals and the company logo on its side. Interestingly, repossessors hadn't impounded it. A traveler had simply found it on a roadside and reported it to the city, who collected and delivered it to us. It first arrived at our front entrance. "May I see your supervisor?" the state employee asked. "Jake," I called as usual. "What is it?" he muttered, trudging out from his office. The man told us what I told you above. "So as we can't find the owner, this is the only place for it," he surmised. "Fine," Jacob accepted, already seeing its merits. The key was strangely in the glove compartment. Collins drove it to the back with the other discarded vehicles, where it waited until the day's end. Work then pillage, as Jacob always said. As we worked, its shadow loomed over the landfill, over us. Try as we might, we could think of nothing else. Time slowed to a snail's pace. We frequently checked our watches, knowing this only slowed things further. At long last, the little hand was at 5, the big at 12. We stopped, turned, and marched there too. Collins had left the door unlocked. We waited patiently as Jacob opened it, turned, and beckoned. "Gentlemen," he beamed. He needn't have told us more. Inside, there was 2 beds, a kitchenette and dining table, and a functioning washroom in the left corner. Looking through, we found nothing we hadn't seen before. A set of drinking glasses, corral and silverware, a blender and a microwave. "We may as well have gone to a thrift store," Jacob surmised. Their hopes were dashed, but not mine. "I'm going to look a bit longer," I told them, as they turned, disappointed. I was sure I would find something of interest. There was no way I couldn't, under its circumstances. I listened as they ignited their engines and vanished into the evening. It was to me to lock the gate. I noticed something. The owners had vanished, but their belongings hadn't. Jake and Collins hadn't noticed, so narrow was their focus. I stepped around the interior, seeking previously unnoticed shelves and compartments, and finding none. "Perhaps they were right," I whispered, before making the pivotal find. I had slumped onto the floor, my back against the bedside. I felt it yield like a trapdoor opening. Startled, I spun around and saw a small door at the bottom. Excitement returned. I laid on my stomach and peered inside. Surprisingly, it lacked the musty odor I expected. It was clean and well kept, about the size of a kitchen sink. I reached in and, in seconds, felt an object, square and leather surface. I pulled it out and rose to my knees, then peered down. It was a leather-embossed chest, weighed a fair deal, which I found promising. I closed the door and rose to my feet. As I walked to my car, I felt ill at ease, as if watched and followed. By whom, I didn't know. The feeling ceased only when I entered. Then I hurried off, my find on the passenger seat. The moon and stars were gone that night. The sky was empty. A portent? I wondered. Hopefully not. At last I came to my apartment and hurried inside. Unease turned quickly back to excitement. I rested my find on my coffee table and opened the lid. There was first a family photo, a father and a mother, a son and a daughter, standing in the backyard, smiling, dressed casually. Beneath it was a leather-bound journal. Intrigued, I picked it up and opened it. I soon learned their name, the Stevensons. The father and author was Carl, the wife Lisa, the son Carl Jr., and the daughter Daisy. The first entry was dated April 2nd of the year before. I have a belief system, he began, a vision for myself and my family. We are about to depart on a journey in its pursuit. I have always held a special disgust for humanity, its mental and physical deficiencies. These, to me, are immutable, as seen in our history, the condition of our planet, our civilization. I was taken back, so stern, so formal. Still, I read on, his narrative compelled. Plebeians and Philistines, he thundered, degrading both themselves and this planet. There is only one solution to the human problem, and that is to cease existing as humans. Luckily, I have found a way, one only few are capable of finding, much less following. I'll have to read more of this, was my only thought. Tomorrow. That night I was exhausted. First, I had to hide the box where it could not be found. I didn't know why, only my landlord had a key to the apartment, and he'd no interest in such things. Still, I buried it in the far corner of my washroom closet. Then I collapsed. While asleep, I had a strange dream. I was floating in a gray mist, with nothing beneath, above, or beside me. Gradually, I distinguished figures hovering in the distance. Human outlines without distinct features. They seemed to speak to each other, but I couldn't discern their words. I only knew they were discussing me. Eventually I woke, kicked in sweat, breathed deeply, and heaved to my feet. Then I cleaned and changed, packed my lunch pail, and gathered my keys. Just as before I left, I felt urged to check my closet, to ensure my find remained. But why? I had locked my door overnight and would have woken to intruders. Still, I complied. It was there. Why wouldn't it be? Its contents were as well. Why wouldn't they be? My fears sated, I left, but not before checking to ensure I'd locked my door. I had. As I drove, my thoughts remained on my box and on my closet. Aaron, Jacob greeted in his usual casual way. Jake, I acknowledged. Luckily, he hadn't found the hidden compartment. I didn't know why I feared this. He dismissed the RV the day before and likely wouldn't return to it. Still, the fear would remain and intensify. As I worked, my mind was still at home, in my closet and on the box. Work itself was a distraction until I could return and continue reading. That is, had there not been a burglary. Perished the thought. Despite my best efforts, Jacob and Collins noticed my demeanor but declined to comment. Well enough, I didn't care to explain. When the day ended, I stayed behind and watched them go. Though he didn't say so, I suspected Jacob had returned to the RV and found the compartment. I crept there to see if he had. He hadn't, or had, and closed the door. At home, the box was still in the closet. I resumed reading, the highlight of my day. Carl seemed to love misanthropy. He and Lisa pulled their children from school, but were not homeschooling them. Worldly knowledge, he maintained, would be of no use to them. They were forbidden to see their friends and relatives. Neither had a place in the new world they were creating. They'd sold their home at the lowest price to the first buyer. It, too, would be useless. He and his wife had quit their jobs. No longer would they face the daily tyranny of bosses, coworkers, and human interaction. If I was reading the dates correctly, this occurred over the course of a year. The last entry I read that night was May 2nd. I wondered, but what of their children? Did they understand what their parents were doing, and why? Had he even tried to explain this all to them? They will understand when our work is finished, he surmised. He continued in the same vein, reiterating his complete and utter disappointment with our species. Frankly, I'd tired of this until I reached the third page. There, he returned to his means to facilitate our ascension. He'd found this in paranormal literature, though it was my own inference and not the author's. The titles were Worlds Beyond the Veil by Ed Holliday, States of Being by Alphonse Constant, and The Art of Transmutation by Theo Hohenheim. Obviously, I'd never heard of them or their authors. In theory, there was a world parallel to ours, one inhabited by a non-human intelligence with which one could commune. Doing so heightens one's mental and physical capacities. This can only occur in remote locations without human inhabitants or civilization. Hence the RV, I thought. I am open-minded but not adventurous. I wouldn't dismiss his claims, nor had I ever researched them. So I resolved to visit the library the next day. It was my day off, and this would simply its best use. I returned the journal to the box to the closet. Then I retired for the evening. Soon the gray mist returned. The same figures watched me from the same distance, speaking the same language. By then, the experience was somewhat familiar. Still, it was no less unnerving, and I hoped it would quickly end. Gradually, they faded into the mist, and the mist faded with them. I woke again uneased, again caked in sweat. I couldn't recall my last trip to the library, though it had to be in early childhood. It was fortunate my town was so small, otherwise I would never have found it. It had one story, one front door, and one small parking lot. If not for the sign, you wouldn't know it was a library. This made sense, as the town had few residents and even fewer read. I parked and waited for it to open. Ironic, I thought. The man who never read being the first in line. The door opened. A small bald man with wide-rimmed glasses stepped out and let me in. Inside, it seemed much larger than I'd guessed. The books were well stocked and the rows neatly arranged. "Help, please," I asked, to avoid aimless wandering. "Yes?" he asked. I told him the books I sought, the authors and the titles. "Really?" he asked, incredulous. "Really," I affirmed. He found them in the filing system and, after briefing me on Dewey's decibels, returned to his counter. I found them easily and fascinating. Both were written in the early century and adorned with garish illustrations of strange scenes and figures. I took them to a table, recalling Carl's names and locations. There, I skipped to the index and scanned it with my fingers. There was a plethora of strange terms, only a few were of interest. At last I found them and moved to the relevant pages. These I photocopied and then returned the books. In the parking lot, I noticed two things. First, I had found the information easily, almost too easily. Second, the librarian was very apprehensive, despite having never seen me before, despite my being unthreatening. I dismissed both. The books were from commercial publishers, and he was likely that way towards everyone. I left the place and went about my day, first lunch, then laundry, then groceries. As usual, my mind was elsewhere, on the papers wrapped and stuffed in my glove compartment. That night I returned home, to my apartment in the Journal. I hurried inside, past my next-door neighbor. He eyed me as the librarian had. I checked my closet. The box was there. Soon I was eating my TV dinner and studying the materials. There I found more information on the things he sought to invoke and the place he sought to at. I correlated this with the library excerpts and found something. The place was not far from my town. While I'd never been there, I knew of it, a stretch of arid prairie in the neighboring state. They must have vanished there, be it by accident, animal, or something else. It was a day's drive at least, not counting navigation errors. Night had fallen, and the next day was Sunday. Obviously, I couldn't go then, but I could plan ahead. One weekend would not suffice, but I could feign illness. I felt bad doing so, but my work was menial, and I could miss a day. Collins could use the overtime. I would go the next Friday and arrive Saturday, allowing a full day and a half to investigate. As I slept, I dreamt the same dream, much more intensely. The figures spoke loudly, moved urgently, at times reaching forth. I had convinced myself this was all just anxiety, so ignored them and waited to awake. When I did, I went to my parents, as again I did on Sundays. I enjoyed their company, but not that of my pampered older sister, who lived with them into her 20s. We played frisbee golf in the backyard before my mother called us to the kitchen. There we discussed the usual subjects. I feigned interest. At times I sought to share my project, but felt it best not to. When I returned to my apartment, there were no signs of intrusion. I didn't know why, but I had feared the possibility. My box had not been stolen, but I did not read more. Instead, I went straight to sleep. The next morning I awoke, not from the dream, but from sound slumber. I reasoned I had overcome my anxiety, congratulated myself, and left for work. The week would trudge at a snail's pace. I felt detached from work and my surroundings. At times I felt I was seeing the world through a fish-eye lens, even familiar sights and sounds blurred, distant, and distorted. At last, Thursday night, I called Jacob, and he answered surprisingly fast. Yes, he asked. Jake, I groaned. I came down with something. He paused before responding. I felt uneased. My performance, was it convincing? Why don't you stay home, then? He asked, affirming me. Thank you, I said, slowly, for effect. So ended the call. I returned the phone to the receiver, threw my hands in the air, and shouted, yes! With my car key in one hand and my atlas in the other, I set forth. The open road awaited. My engine sputtered. It would suffice. I left the parking lot. Collins passed my building en route to work in the morning. Were he to see me, my cover would be blown. I could duck beneath my windshield, but he knew my car. Luckily, he didn't appear, and soon I was en route. My atlas, cheaply made and out of date, lay on my passenger seat. I would use it later. For now, I was on familiar ground, roads I had driven before. Gradually, my surroundings grew less familiar. The trees were taller, denser, the grass overgrown, punctuated by stately boulders. Local fauna were likely large and aggressive. Luckily, my windows rolled upward at the tap of a button. The road ahead had no turn, so I would not yet consult my atlas. The first signs of civilization were a convenience store, a motel, and 2 shack homes. I paused to refuel and get the gist of the locals. The former would be easy, the latter not so much. The station was self-serve, and the pumps worked despite visible wear. I filled my tank and strolled inside. Its condition was decrepit. Its shelves were so old the items on them contrasted sharply. It was a full minute before I even noticed an employee, a small, wizened man with graying black hair and coarse skin appearing suddenly at the counter. He looked both concerned and disdainful, like he wished I weren't there, for his sake and mine. I paid and hastened off, hoping the town would improve from then on. How could such a place exist so close by without my knowing? Was I provincial, or was it just obscure? I could only speculate. I drove on, wary but undeterred. More forests passed, and then more forest. Eventually the next stop appeared, identical to the first. Thankfully, I had enough fuel I needn't pause. By then, night had fallen. I slowed and squinted. I was unsure what animals lurked in these parts, but I feared the humans more. At last, a road sign appeared. A third village was just minutes ahead. I saw a crude motel, but passed it, preferring to sleep in my car. There was a clearing in the woods, a convenient location. Invisible to locals, well linked to the main road. I pulled up and peered both ways. It appeared unreachable by foot, but one could never be sure. I then parked and reflected. Was this worthwhile, or was I simply a doomed eccentric? I fell asleep before I could determine. The sun rose and I awoke, my back sore from my seat. I scanned my interior for signs of intrusion. I didn't know why. It's not as if I'd brought anything worth stealing. In any case, my car seemed untouched, and the dirt outside bore no footprints. I began my engine and returned to the road. The village was a rest stop, and I sought to be quickly there and gone. I arrived shortly thereafter. Though the drive was brief, the environment changed considerably. The trees and grass thinned and faded. In their place was sand and rock, a beach without an ocean. This wasn't uncommon, but the transition was. In the forest stood a row of shacks. I have my wits, I'll keep them about me, I thought. I found a secluded spot, parked and headed to it. The location was a plain stretch of land, dry and arid, with rocks and withered plants. At first I saw nothing of note, whether natural or not. I was about to go when I did at last. In the distance, there was a slight decline in the sand and a row of stone protrusions. Curious, I approached and crouched, spreading and removing the sand. My disappointment would be short-lived. The rocks, I gradually realized, were human skeletons. Ah! I gasped and nearly fell to my back. A skull on a skeleton leered through empty sockets. I was not afraid, simply startled, and then fascinated. I continued, unearthing a second, then a third, and then a fourth. At last I stood, stepped back, and studied them. The first was roughly 5'11", the second roughly 5'6", and the third and fourth just over 4 feet. The second's pelvis was wide, its bones open. A father, a mother, and their offspring. This shocked me, though shouldn't have. This was the site of their disappearance. I knew they were dead, just not why. "Hey!" someone chorus shouted. Startled, I turned to see a middle-aged man in faded jeans and a plaid work shirt. "You," he addressed me. "Yes," I asked. "My name's Steve. I live and work nearby. What's the fascination?" The Stevensons, I stated bluntly. Ah, yeah, I remember, he said. I was going to ask, but he quickly spoke again. Listen, you going to be here later? I will, I affirmed. So will I. He offered his hand, and I obliged. Then he turned to his vehicle. I had stood strategically in front of the skeletons all the while. I then realized the locals could have killed the family and buried their remains. If seen, they could do the same to me. As for Steve, was his vow a veiled threat? Could I trust him, or would he himself be part of the mob? Would he lead it? I was undeterred. If he proved an ally, he would be indispensable. I returned to my car to seek diversions. I would explore the area, not for its own merits, but potential clues. Soon, however, the worst occurred. Steve's truck returned, pulling beside me. He lowered his window, and I hesitantly did the same. Hey, he greeted, sticking his head out the window. Yeah, I asked. Care to join us at the watering hole? Us? I thought they didn't like outsiders. As long as you're with me, you'll be fine. Fine, I agreed, assuming he was well regarded. He pulled ahead. I followed. In 10 minutes, we reached the village. Like the others, it had little, 3 decrepit houses, 1 gas station, 1 general store, and naturally, the watering hole. Its name was, according to its sign, Parched. We parked before it. I followed him inside, keeping distant. It was the same inside as it was outside, scarcely removed from pioneer days. Besides the barkeep, 1 man sat at the counter. They gazed toward us, eyeing Steve with favor and me with suspicion. Who's he? The barfly asked. This is Aaron. He's here to research the Stevensons, he answered in stride. The men listened, their demeanors softened. I seemed welcome after all. We sat at the counter, and the keep poured 2 mugs of the usual. Schlitz, warm like urine, flat like tap water, thin foam floating on top. As usual, my interest was solely information. It came quickly and with little effort. With subtle prodding from Steve, the barfly, whose name I learned was Ron, spoke to me. He was first incredulous and then concerned. I remember the night just a couple of weeks ago, he began. I was walking home from this place when I saw the headlights in the dark. Saw him park right on the spot, just kept walking. Every night when they thought we was asleep, they gathered wood and arranged it in this circle. I don't know what they were doing, but it must have been something. They tried to hide it from us. Real weird ceremony it was. Dancing, chanting. Must have lasted at least an hour, and then one night, boomed! He exclaimed, flailing his arms wildly. Boom what? I asked. Blinding flashing. Flash of light, he exclaimed. Came and went in an instant and took them with. The guys from the county arrived the next morning and found their vehicle. I was surprised. Local police were not investigating, but it seemed they weren't. If they were, this yokel would know and would have mentioned their snooping. I did not entirely believe his story, but didn't say so aloud. If anything, I was slightly disappointed. I could have easily imagined the same yarn. Still, he agreed to join us. The keep hesitated. He was superstitious. Come on, Hank, Steve cajoled. At last, he relented. The day passed quickly, and we returned. I noticed by flashlight the imprint of a 4-pointed circle in the center of the expanse. Maybe the barfly was right, I thought. The place differed at night. The atmosphere was thicker, as if one could reach forth and touch it. Beneath us there seemed an energy coursing through the ground. Without asking, the barfly turned to me and stared knowingly. I told you so. This was not the morning's banal oasis. I turned to the others, and they to me, and our eyes met. This barfly, it seemed, was a prophet. Suddenly the sensation intensified. From the pit a presence emerged, intelligent and watching closely. Again we eyed each other in unease. We stood around the pit, watching from different angles. Something was about to occur, if it hadn't already. A low drone sounded from the sky, beginning quietly and slowly growing louder. I gazed upward and saw a series of colors forming and dissolving into ever-changing abstract shapes. This continued until I lost count of time, until I forgot where I was. Gradually, 4 figures emerged therefrom, those I'd dreamt. They stood in order from tallest to shortest. There were 4, their heights matching the skeletons. The father had realized his ambitions after all. Gazing upward, I thought of the yearnings in his writings. Could this be all our fate? I asked. Or only those who transformed? In light of this, was he truly so eccentric? They hovered in the sky, unaffected by gravity. They had no distinct features, only blazing pupilless eyes. They didn't descend, they didn't address us, simply gazed upon us, speaking to each other in a language we had never heard, at least never heard before. Gradually the colors faded, and they faded with them. We stood entranced, dumbfounded, saying nothing to each other. At last we returned to my car and left in silence. I spent the night in my new friend's trailer. Neither of us could sleep. The next morning his friend stopped by and I bid them adieu. Upon entering my car, I opened the glove compartment. The box was missing. Panicking, I checked every inch of the interior, hoping I had misplaced it. Alas, I hadn't.